Coffee is for leaders.
Culture is really what happens when you're not in the room. That's actually the aggregate. If you look at the aggregate amount of time spent by our people, most of the time, my partner and I are not there. And so for us, it's really about trying to assess what is going on when we're not there and how do we influence it. And so I think we've built some mechanisms to do that. And, our culture is actually really simple. We're a mission-driven company. We try to reduce a lot of the noise. We don't have many, overblown processes.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show. Means a lot to have you. You're the co-founder and CEO of April, which is the first AI-powered embedded tax platform that modernizes the way Americans file and manage their taxes. So give us a sense for how you saw this as a need and how you're integrating AI into taxes.
Well, first of all, Clint, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. What we're focused on here at April is embedding tax inside of every financial decision. When you think about the way that tax manifests itself for most Americans, 150 million American households and over 30 million small businesses, that's about the largest single expense most Americans will have over the course of the year, on par with their housing. And it represents nearly half of the $5 trillion in revenue collected by the U.S. federal government every year. It's a massive sum of money. And the reality is most Americans have no idea how to optimize this spend, how to take advantage of the tax law. And they're really just chalking it up at the end of the year to basically saying, hey, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to spend some money and basically get out of here as quickly as possible. And what we're saying as the next frontier of embedded finance is there's a much better way to do this. Everyday people, mass affluent people, moderate income households, new business owners, old business owners can take advantage of the tax law just like the most sophisticated investors. And that's what our mission here is to do at April, is to help everybody be a sophisticated investor, basically, and take advantage of the tax law as it applies to them. As it relates to AI, there's many different ways that AI applies to what we do. If you think of tax, we cover complex modeling, a lot of math and statistics, obviously, and of course, touching many different documents, basically all of the documents that an individual or small business will have over the course of the year. But principally, the way that we've used AI to really differentiate and catapult ourselves into market is actually to help us with the development process. You've probably seen Windsurf and some of the other popular coding tools that have really exploded over the last a few months and quarters. And what we've done is basically built something like that, but for ourselves, that's proprietary, towards helping translating the tax law. If you think about this problem, there's only about 10 companies that actually have a national charter with the U.S. government and with 50 states to be able to calculate and transmit taxes. Those are companies like Intuit and H&R Block. Most of them were built in the 80s and 90s. And so when we started down this journey of figuring out how are we going to embed taxes within traditional financial applications, we realized we needed a new technology stack, and one did not exist. And so the moonshot, or Manhattan Project, as we like to call it, was how are we going to be one of 10 companies and the first one in 15 years to be able to build this? And for us, that really came down to AI. My partner, Daniel, used to be the CTO of Waze, the popular navigation app. And prior to ChatGPT launching, we had some insight coming out of Google into what was coming and made a really big bet on code automation. And sure enough, a couple of years later, we're the first company to do it and are now scaling our business rapidly.
That's incredible, man. So what were you doing prior to April? What were you doing?
Yeah, I have an interesting story. I started out as an entrepreneur, actually, not far from where I am right now. Our offices are in downtown Manhattan. I went to NYU and I took this phenomenal class with a professor named Larry Lenihan, who is also a venture capitalist at First Mark Capital. He backed prolific companies like Pinterest and Shopify. And basically, he ran a competition in his class and we won it. And we got a whopping $12,500, which was his salary. I don't think he really needed the money. And I started my first business. And so I parallel tracked my degree at NYU and my first venture-backed company and, really cut my teeth. It was early in the New York ecosystem. I was actually working out of one of the first WeWorks at Barrack Street and would shuttle back and forth to my classes. And so I learned a lot basically about what not to do and realized how much I didn't know, right? And so I think that's one of my first principles of business in general is you probably know a lot less than you think you know. And I realized how much I didn't know. And so I went to a place really that didn't make a lot of sense coming from the tech world, but to me made a lot of sense as a place to explore the world and better understand how decisions were made and how businesses worked. And so I went to Deloitte Consulting and pretty quickly became the lead for fintech. And so I became the person that the firm would call whenever a board of a large insurance company or a large conglomerate would have about how do we deal with this new up and coming payments technology, or what do we do about AI or blockchain. And so I got to see some of the largest U.S. Financial services businesses, brands like AIG and American Express and Citigroup, really from the highest levels, and quickly realized that, and I'm not pointing to any one of them in particular, but quickly realized that many of the most sophisticated business leaders and businesses also are figuring things out as they go. And information is imperfect. And it's honestly a small miracle that a lot of this stuff works half of the time, right? And so that really inspired me. One, it empowered me on the one hand, and on the other hand, I realized like the change wasn't going to come from traditional financial services. And I took kind of a detour from a segment perspective and went into cybersecurity. But what I was doing was building companies from scratch at a venture group called Team 8. I joined up with this great individual named Nadav. Nadav was the former commander of Unit 8200, which is sort of the NSA equivalent in Israel, a very prolific intelligence unit. And Nadav was had sort of retired from his military career and was focused on solving tough problems in cybersecurity. I really had very little interest in cybersecurity. I still think pretty much everything can be hacked. And I still don't quite understand the level of spend in cybersecurity. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, the problems we were tackling, to me, were at the heart of unlocking business productivity, which is if we can, every time I would bring a project in the bank or the insurance company, it would always get killed by the cyber or the compliance people. And what if we built a secure blockchain company or a secure IoT company or a cyber risk company? And sure enough, that's what we did. And we built one of the first secure blockchain vaults. We sold that business to PayPal. It became PayPal Crypto. We built one of the first cyber risk assessment companies. That is now the way that Moody's assesses cyber risk, got bought by BitSight as part of a JV with Moody's. And I helped scale that fund from about 40 million under management to about $1 billion under management in 4 years. And so I got to see both cybersecurity and really risk management from the highest levels. I spent a lot of time with some of the former generals and commanders of the largest 3-letter agencies, a lot of the CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, and got to see the things that were keeping them up at night, the things that they were being asked to do by world leaders and the risks that they were being asked to manage. And so that really inspired me, to be able to go and tackle a really big and audacious problem. And we were iterating on the next idea, if you will, with a very talented individual named Ashwin Chabra, who runs the Jim Simons Foundation. And that's ultimately what led to April. And so I spun out and said, I'm ready to be an entrepreneur again. I'm not ready to hang up my boots and be a career venture capitalist. And ultimately spun the business out about 4 years ago and started the company.
That's incredible. And I assume you've raised like an angel round, a seed round, and I'm talking to you on a day where you publicly announced your Series B round. Give us a sense for how you've thought about raising money and the importance of today's announcement. Obviously, when people watch this, it won't be today, but we're literally talking on the day when you announced that you've raised a Series B. Give us a sense for how you thought about that.
Definitely. So today we announced a $38 million Series B led by QED Investors, which is a very prestigious fintech investor started by one of the co-founders of Capital One, Nigel Morris. And they've actually been partners with us since we started the company 4 years ago. And, we've raised $78 million today. What we're building at April is really what we consider an infrastructure company. It actually looks a lot more like a biopharmaceutical company, if you will. There's this really big build project that happens at the beginning. And then over time, that infrastructure, as we turn it on and hook it up to the distribution channels, which are the largest fintech apps, wealth management platforms, payroll companies, can go really, really quick. And so we were actually we raised almost $40 million in the first year of starting the business, and we were pre-revenue for almost 3 years. So maybe not the traditional path that a lot of venture businesses take, and you have to manage your cash burn carefully and your milestones carefully because you're not necessarily hitting those traditional revenue markers that other companies would at capital raises of that size. But what we've been able to do since sort of turning on the monetization channels in the last 18 months is basically double the business every quarter. And so our business has almost 10x'd over the last year. We've signed deals with a $1 trillion asset manager, a top US exchange, a Fortune 5 company. So we're rapidly growing and expanding, and I think proving that there was this unmet need for a tax infrastructure that could be a real alternative for businesses that wanted to get into the tax game. Today, if you want to do your taxes, you have to go to a retail location like H&R Block. You have to go to Intuit online, TurboTax, or you have to call an accountant. And I think our take is there's another way, and that other way should be you should be able to engage with your taxes where you get paid, where you store your money, where you invest for your wealth and your retirement.
And are you thinking like this is also like businesses will be able to use this and companies and corporations and things like that? Because that's pretty complicated. How are you thinking about, because obviously like going right after the H&R Block and TurboTax and things like that, that makes a lot of sense. Like that's a huge opportunity. But how are you thinking about like the business aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, the tax market is a $20 billion market. About half of that is software. About half of that is preparation. You can't boil the ocean, right? We already have a pretty large surface area that we're going after. We have a fully regulated tax engine. We have multiple applications. We have APIs. We're selling B2B2C. So we're selling basically through these financial platforms, but with an application that touches the end customer. And so that, is a significant investment and a significant also, surface area to optimize and maintain. And so I think for us, we, would ultimately like to, look at many parts of that market, but today really are focused on, personal and households and small businesses through these different financial channels. And who knows what the future has in store, but yes, certainly there's a means in which at least parts of what we've built could be useful to larger companies and corporations as well.
How do you think about AI and its future? And obviously you're integrating it into your product extensively, but give us a sense for, obviously it's the talk of the world, talk of the tech community for sure, business world. What's your take on it? Where do you see this thing going in 5 years?
Yeah, look, Clint, I'll be honest. I'm a little bit controversial about it. And I think it's because there's this take. I've been through, I don't have as many gray hairs. I have a few gray hairs. You might not be able to see them on the screen, but I started my career right when cloud and mobile were taking off. And I think there were two really interesting parallels that I saw is, first of all, people were starting businesses that were mobile businesses. It turned out that wasn't a thing. If you have an app that people were using in the web, they may also want to use it on a mobile device, but they may not. And there's no, like Uber turned out to be totally powered. DoorDash, you had these companies that were really led by mobile compute, but many things were not. Like the idea of most people needing a just a mobile bank. Yes, now some people prefer to bank, only on a mobile device. But I think that transition took a lot longer than people thought it would. And just saying, oh, I'm a mobile bank, turned out not to be differentiated enough for most companies. Obviously, there's a few that turned out to be able to sort of push through there. And then I think when you look at cloud, cloud was going to kind of be the disruptor to everything. Everyone was becoming a cloud company. It's like, I'm a cloud CRM. It's like saying when people say I'm an AI CRM or I'm an AI, I just think that they don't understand the problem they're solving. And so the way that we look at AI is it's an enabler. We use AI in many components of the business. We use it for code automation. We answer many of our customer inquiries. We use it for document analysis. The user doesn't necessarily know it's there. Our customer doesn't necessarily know it's there, but we go faster. We deliver more services at a lower cost. And I think that's what our customers really care about. In the talk, I get asked now, what's my AI roadmap? And I don't mean it in a disingenuous way, but to me, that's the wrong question. You should be asking, how is your roadmap accelerated by AI? What things can you do that you couldn't do before with AI? With maybe the labor force that you have. Those are the questions people need to be asking. Maybe it's a shorthand, but to me, it shows a certain amount of maybe naivete and also exuberance from the overall market, right? I think this whole idea that everything is going to be quote unquote agentic is a little bit overblown. I don't know that I'm just going to be giving instructions to my LLM and they're going to be booking my flights. I'm also not convinced that really saves me that much time. And so I think we need to keep things in proportion and realize that the adoption cycles on the one hand have been astronomical when you look at revenue for some of these companies and what, ChatGPT has done to change the knowledge graph. Absolutely. But I think when it comes to business process and some other more refined parts of the stack, I think it's going to be a little bit slower than people think, and it's going to surprise us in ways that it is adopted and that it's not adopted.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Give me a sense for what a typical day looks like for you as you're scaling this thing.
No, there's not. And I think, I know we're on a CEO podcast here, but I think as a CEO of a venture-backed company, my principal job is really the founder. I'm the founder of the business first, and I'm the CEO second. And maybe at some point that changes, but I will always free up my schedule and keep it flexible to be able to work on the most urgent problems. I wake up in the morning. I have a routine. I work out. I get my diet right. I take care of my kids. I see my family. And then I go all in and go as hard as I can. And that's at whatever is going to be the thing that unblocks and moves my business forward that day. And so if I need to rearrange my schedule or rearrange travel, I will definitely do that. Obviously, being a B2B company, you can't be quite as flexible maybe as being a consumer business. I have, commitments to clients and prospects that, I need to show up. So to some extent, my schedule, can be a little bit more rigid than I would like, or than some other founders might have it. But I try to leave room for time to have creative thinking and problem solve for the items that are most urgent at that moment.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Give me a sense for how you're maintaining culture within the company and as it grows, and how you're thinking about culture. Obviously, you're at this early stage. How are you thinking about culture?
Definitely. We were quite intentional. I think actually Daniel and I, my co-founder and I, didn't partner until we traded a manifesto that we would edit for one another, and we got it to a point that there were no more red lines. And I think, we had both seen early in our career really smart, hardworking people let their egos get in the way, shy away from thoughtful disagreement, get distracted by things that don't really matter. And so for us, culture, that's all you really have at the end of the day. You have your productive capacity, which for most tech companies basically is the people you have, and getting them to work together towards a common mission and vision. And so for us, it's really everything. And I know it's trite, but I think what Ben Horowitz said in his book is right, which is culture is really what happens when you're not in the room. That's actually the aggregate. If you look at the aggregate amount of time spent by our people, most of the time, my partner and I are not there. And so for us, it's really about trying to assess what is going on when we're not there and how do we influence it. And so I think we've built some mechanisms to do that. And, our culture is actually really simple. We're a mission-driven company. We try to reduce a lot of the noise. We don't have many, overblown processes or many overblown asks from our employees. It's sort of like a no frills. We think this is an incredible opportunity for people to work on a problem that impacts all of us in a way. I mean, we just saw what happened with the One Big Beautiful Bill and how controversial it was, and how many different parts of the economy. I actually read most of the Senate bill, which was almost 800 pages, at least the part that applied to the tax. I don't think people realize when you hear the politicians talk what is actually in these bills. I mean, it impacts the food we eat, the incentives we have around immigration, the incentives we have around auto loans and where our cars are made. I mean, it really touches all facets of our economy. And so for us, we try to remove to improve. And so for us, it's really less is more. How do we keep people focused on hard, disciplined work, working on the right things, real teamwork, and real problem solving?
Not to get political, but is it a good thing or a bad thing, the Big Beautiful Bill?
Like anything else, I think there are elements of the bill that are really valid. I think there are winners and losers like anything, and that's obviously going to upset people, and that's unfortunately part of politics. So I'm not going to opine on that piece of it. But I think generally speaking, it's a from a legislative perspective, I think it was a well-written piece of legislation. You can disagree with it. And we'll see what types of impacts it has on sort of the deficit relative to what happens with tariffs. Again, I'm not sure anybody really knows, but I think it was a fair bill that the government rightfully passed from that perspective.
Give me a sense for your macroeconomic perspective going into the second half of this year, which we're already in. How are you feeling about it? How have tariffs affected your business at all? Do they affect at your stage? Give us a sense for how you're thinking about things.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And I think, where I'd start is to say we've been in what feels like a period of uncertainty now for basically 4 years. And I grew up really in a post-2008 business cycle where things were kind of rocky, but then they stabilized. And then for about a decade, everybody kind of knew where things were at. And so, I think the only norm is that we're in an unstable, chaotic, both global, national, and possibly local environment, depending on where you live. And so I think it's expect the unexpected, which means you have to be a little bit more conservative. You have to leave room for error. You have to expect that things are going to happen, that we just don't expect, and on time horizons that we don't expect them. And so like the whole AI boom, we believed in, we underwrote the business based on AI, but we didn't expect it. And this is people that were coming from the industry to happen as quickly as it did. I was a very early investor and user of Ethereum when it was $6. I've been believing in this thing for the better part of the decade, and then you get a piece of legislation, a couple of companies to figure something out, and you're kind of off to the races. And so I think that, generally speaking, look, tariffs might hurt some businesses very specifically. We're not affected directly by tariffs. And I think most of the U.S. financial services businesses that we index to, again, components of them might be, but generally speaking are not, fundamentally affected by them. But we're very affected by interest rates, and we're very, affected, I would say, by economic certainty, because our product is a new product. And when we ask customers to invest with us, that's like a new investment, right? It's R&D investment. It's investing into something that's net new from a marketing user. It's a growth mentality. And so that generally does better when leadership is positive about the outlook. And I think there's a general sense of positivity, but there's still a lot of concern because you have so many different tail risks. You have various different global events. You have trade wars. You have civil and ongoing, I would say domestic political ping pong, right? It's also we kind of keep going back and forth. So I think it's kind of cautious optimism, and with a very careful sense of responsibility and accountability for making sure we have wiggle room.
Give us a sense for New York City's startup community and the VC community. I think it was once called Silicon Alley. I don't know if you guys still call yourselves that or not, but obviously, everybody knows about Silicon Valley, and but New York City has a very, very strong tech and startup ecosystem. Give us a sense for that.
Yeah, look, I've been here since there was it was basically Union Square Ventures, First Mark, and a couple of funds. And you had to go to Sand Hill Road to get money. And now you look at all the big funds, Andreessen, Lightspeed, they all have presence here. You don't have to go to the Valley to raise money. I don't love the Silicon Alley term. I think the New York business environment is very different than what you find in the Valley. And I think the strengths and weaknesses here are just different. The culture here is much more business first, tech second, so that we don't have tech leadership. But if you look at most of the technology innovation, I think that still predominantly comes out of the broader Silicon Valley area. And a lot of what you have here is going to be more of your fintech, ad tech, components that are tied to industry, and have a little bit of a different capital cycle to them, probably a different entrepreneur. I think there is more blend now, and more cross pollination than there was maybe a decade ago. I love the ecosystem here, but it is. I think there are aspects of whether you're going for deep tech or whether you're going for something that requires a lot of virality. I think there are certain elements of the Valley that still are advantageous. I love building my companies here in New York. I wouldn't trade it, and I wouldn't trade living anywhere else in the world, quite frankly. But I think there are advantages to both at this point. And so what we've done to complement that is we have a kind of a sub company or subsidiary in Tel Aviv. And so a lot of our R&D talent is coming out of there because you do get a really dense nucleus coming out of Tel Aviv that does have that deep tech angle.
Yeah, it's got to be great for fintech, right? Because it's New York City, greatest city in the world, but also the financial capital of the world, right? So there's got to be some advantages for you building a fintech.
For us, I love the New York Tel Aviv, sort of a symbiotic relationship. We get the cutting edge finance here in New York. We have cutting edge R&D in Tel Aviv. It's a very good setup. I'd like to have more of a presence in the Valley over time, but you can only spread yourself so thin at the earlier days. But for us, it's worked out very, very well.
Yeah, that's finally, because I don't want to keep you for too long. We end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com, we believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
There are a lot of people. And I think that's, we probably could sit here for another hour and talk about them. I think Nadav gave me a real shot coming out. Nadav's now the CEO of Checkpoint. And so he had founded Teammate, and he gave me a real shot coming out of Deloitte. I was a young kid. And he was meeting with heads of state and Fortune 100 CEOs, and he really let me in and gave me a lot of autonomy to be his chief of staff. And I just learned a tremendous amount under his stewardship about leadership. He led Israeli intelligence during some pretty many periods there have been chaotic and dealing with uncertainty and real life and death situations. And so I think I learned a lot about how to deal with ambiguity, how to have grit and mental toughness, and those things have served me really well. And I'll be forever grateful for that. But it is also a good reminder that you have to pay it forward, because none of us would be here if somebody didn't take a chance on us at some point in time.
Yeah, that's for sure. Hey, Ben, thanks so much for coming on. Congratulations today on the big raise. That's so hard to do. I know how hard that is. We celebrate raising maybe a little bit too much, but it also it's very hard to do to close those types of rounds. So congratulations on all of that. Let's have you back in a year, man. It'd be fun to catch up and see where you've gotten.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Clint. I'd love to continue the conversation whenever you'd like.
Okay. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man.